For nearly 20 years, John Niednagel has developed his system of brain typing, which pinpoints certain attributes controlled by the brain, allowing him to predict a player's success.
Why I call it brain typing versus personality or psychological types is that I'm talking about an inborn schematic. I'm talking about something that's biological. Every person on the planet has 1 of 16 inborn designs. So once you understand that, you name the situation and it'll tell you how their brain will process that and how their motor movements will also correspond to the task that's being required. And that's why I can usually walk through a mall and half the people who walk by me, I can just look at them and I would bet my whole life, everything I've got, that I can tell you exactly what their design is by their look and the way they walked.
Niednagel has discovered that NBA players can have a variety of brain types, but the great ones seem to have a lot in common.
There are wonderful athletes with different designs. There is a design like a Larry Bird and a John Stockton, and even a Michael Jordan falling within that same category. And there are other ones that are LeBron James and Magic Johnson and Darren Williams and Chris Paul in another design. And out of 16 brain types, you'll have maybe a handful that are really your more superior players.
When you're a closer, you're asked to come up clutch almost every time you take the mound. So what kind of brain do you need for that?
The most successful brain type for closers has been the ENTP. The E stands for extroverted, they're more energy expending. N stands for intuitive, that means they're more conceptual. T stands for thinking, they're into logic, they're more tough-minded. And P stands for perceiving, which is more right brain dominance. They see what could be.
Francisco Cordero strikes out the side in the ninth.
They think they're the greatest. They're going to have a great outing tonight.
Strike 3 called.
They are just a little more animated. They live more for thrills and risk-taking. They love the adrenaline rushes. It's the reward system. It's the motivation.
Swung on and missed. Strike 3.
And looking back through time, our brain type expert has found that the most successful closers in the game often possess that kind of brain.
The top 20 closers of all time, 9 out of 20 that I've noticed have that particular brain type. Some of the ENTPs of the past who've been the best, Lee Smith is this second all time in saves, and he had that design.
Struck him out.
Down to Raleigh Fingers, down to Bruce Sutter. There's just been a whole bunch of them.
The Cardinals, the world champions.
I mean, they have funky deliveries.
Struck him out.
They have that same ENTP brain type.
But that's not the case with perhaps the most clutch closer of all time. He's a little different.
Look at Rivera. His type, the INFP, that's an exact opposite part of the brain as these ENTPs. He has that design who can focus and introvert and channel that emotion. He definitely has adrenaline rushes, but I guarantee you they are half of what ENTPs would have.
Mariano Rivera wrapping up a Yankees victory.
Look at his animation. I mean, it's just like, oh well. Mariano Rivera would be much more apt to stew over a failure than the other designs, except he's so good that he rarely has that difficulty.
All right, so now you made your name in the NFL when you tried to warn the Chargers away from Ryan Leaf. What was GM Bobby Beathard's reaction when you said, stay away from this guy?
You know, Bobby is one of my favorite people on the planet, and he never thought I was nuts. He had a whole organization to sell. You know, Bobby didn't know a whole lot about my work. They only brought me in just weeks basically before the draft, and so I presented the information not only to him but the whole staff there. And but Bobby was super receptive, and but you know, they just were in a position where they were picking number 2, and so I mean, there are a lot of people who are hard-headed in this world and not open-minded, but Bobby is not that. He's a fantastic guy, and to this day, I just think, you know, he's as good as they come in football.
What exactly was it about Ryan Leaf that put up the red flags?
Well, his design is called ESTJ, and they can be.
That sounds bad.
Well, what's bad about, I'm an ISTJ, and that's bad too. The J stands for left brain dominant, and under pressure it gets more of a tunnel vision. It's like a deer in headlights, and that's one of the things I tried to tell them about beforehand, is that he wouldn't have that great peripheral awareness, that stereoscopic vision as well too, to see the field as well. And so the thing is that actually Ryan's design is one of the best pitchers in baseball, but they just, because they can throw certain kinds of pitches, but they're always wild. They don't have the consistent throwing motion. They're more mechanical, and they're just not as elusive on their feet. So it's a decent type. It's about 8 out of 16, but I'm always looking for guys in the top 4.
Okay, so that would play well for a baseball pitcher, that Ryan Leaf's particular brain type.
Exactly. In fact, Nolan Ryan has the same wiring.
All right. So
different personality, but in terms of the inborn configuration of the brain, it's the same.
Have you seen any notable exceptions where you see a guy who's terrible brain type for a quarterback, but actually turns out to be a pretty good QB?
Well, you know, that's a great point there. Actually, the whole thing about brain typing, it's about 60-40 nature versus nurture. So you can have the greatest wiring in the world, but if you don't develop your game properly and you don't have the greatest work habits, then you may have the top design, but you're not going to go anywhere. You may not even be drafted for that matter. Conversely, if you have a lesser wiring, let's say, and you work really hard at it, you have the chance to achieve. You know, rather than saying NFL, if you take tennis a few years back, Jim Courier did not have one of the top designs at all, but he went to the Bollettieri Academy, worked his tail off, and the guy ended up being an incredible overachiever. So there's ones in the NFL I could throw at you, but Jim is one that comes to mind as one of the biggest overachievers of all time.
What's Terrell Owens' brain type? What do you got on him?
Well, let me just, you know, a lot of things I could say, but let's put it this way. One of the things about him, he's high energy, he's right brain dominant, and he's very feeling. And what happens is that those types are very reactionary emotionally. So they also are not, they're real sensitive to criticism. So meaning that if a coach is going to, you know, write him and say things, that they're going to, you know, react more, and they're going to do it more in an emotional way. So he's a great receiver, plays with a lot of passion, but actually there's some great athletes in all sports that have that design.
Okay, now you say there's one professional athlete who has the same brain type as Albert Einstein. Who is this guy, and why do you see it?
Well, Dikembe Mutombo actually has that design, and I read him a long time ago. And actually, they're the Einsteins off the court, not necessarily on the court. That's why even Dikembe's motor skills have never been all that super coordinated. He's the only guy I've really found, especially in the NBA, who's made it and stuck there with that type. And you know, the other thing too is that later on I found out that he is quite cerebral. I didn't know it at the time, but I understand he speaks, you know, multiple languages and so forth. So don't ever get into a debate with Dikembe. I have a feeling you'll lose.
All right, I'll stay away from that. I know the Celtics and Nuggets use you. Jonathan, this is really interesting stuff. Thank you for coming on so much.
Hey, I appreciate it, David.
All right, Jonathan Niednagel from the Brain Type Institute.
With The Brain Doctor, when the Pulse continues on ABC News Saturday night.
What do Madeleine Albright and Whoopi Goldberg have in common? According to the man you're about to meet, a lot. He practices something called brain typing, and he says the brains of the Secretary of State and the comedian are very similar in the way they operate. But what does that actually mean, and how did he figure that out? We're going to let the Brain Doctor tell you. As Tom Foreman explains, a lot of important people are paying big bucks for his information.
21 left. Double team on Askew. He drives down the middle to Wallace. Blocked by Robert.
It is a hot night for basketball in Phoenix.
He hit it.
The Suns and the Portland Trail Blazers are storming the court. But unknown to millions who are watching the game, with every block, with every pass, with every shot, the Suns are also testing a radical, almost mystical theory about the human brain. A theory that came from this quiet man seated behind their bench.
I was thinking of your whole game, trying to go from the front to the back.
Back to the front.
Yeah, the back to the front.
When the Suns practice, the basketball talk can sound, well, strange.
Your type is very conceptual, and you have a real high pain threshold. Your type is the best two-guard in the NBA because you've got the gross motor abilities.
The man talking about types and motor abilities isn't a Suns coach. His name is John Niednagel, and around here they call him the Brain Doctor. He believes that athletes and the rest of us perform according to the way our brains are wired, our brain types.
I ended up being able to watch people move, and through their motor movements, know what their brain type was.
You were studying the difference between whether a person, for example, derived their power from pushing with their legs or from quickly flicking with their wrist when they pushed a ball.
That would not only tell me what their dominant body skills are, But it also told me what part of the brain literally they were strongest in.
And once you know what part of their brain they're strongest in, you can most maximize their potential or expose their weaknesses.
Exactly.
I thought it was like some mad scientist trying to come up with some new creation to get a little publicity. But
You didn't believe it?
No, I didn't believe it at all.
When three-time All-Star guard Kevin Johnson first heard the talk about his brain type, he scoffed at it.
What'd you think?
So did starting forward Antonio McDyess.
Actually, I thought it was phony, actually.
But within just moments of meeting Neidnagel, his opinion changed.
I was like stunned because, you know, he was telling me things that happened.
That you thought nobody knew about you.
Right off the bat, and it was unbelievable.
Has it made your game better?
Oh, man.
Here's McDyess.
Take it, Dice. Take it, baby.
A lot better.
Neidnagel told McDyess his brain type was too affected by the crowd.
Just realize that you can go to a whole nother level.
And he is teaching McDyess to shut down the self-critical part of his brain.
You're saying that this inborn brain design is just as critical and just as set as a person's height.
Absolutely.
According to Neidnagel, every person is born with a particular brain type, and that has a unique combination of psychological traits. For example, a person is introverted or extroverted, tends to think things through or feel things out, and so on. On top of that, the psychological traits link up in the brain to very specific motor skills, and understanding that connection, says Neidnagel, gives him a sort of X-ray vision. He can identify any person's brain type after observing them for just a few moments. And he means any person's, even on videotape.
Saddam Hussein?
Yeah. You have any idea?
Well, let me just say this, that actually in the last 100 years that we've had some presidents with Saddam Hussein's brain type.
He calls that type the chief executive officer.
And if they get off the beaten path, they can become unbelievably controlling.
In all, there are 16 different brain types, and Neidnagel gives each a label. For example, the strategizer is a great long-term planner.
I always wanted to be a sportscaster.
Neidnagel says Henry Kissinger is a strategizer.
And Henry Kissinger!
Incredibly, he says, so is Robin Williams.
Well, actually, they do have the same inborn wiring,
Even though their personalities are wildly different.
based on their environment. Environment plays a major role in who we are, but the inborn wiring, the brain type, does not change. That's indelible.
How valuable is this kind of information? Just ask the head coach of the Suns, Danny Ainge. 2 years ago, the Suns signed the brain doctor to an exclusive 3-year contract. They are betting a lot of money he knows what he is talking about.
He'd call me before a player ever became famous and said, keep an eye on this player. He's wired perfectly.
He might be getting traded.
And over time, you would see these predictions come true.
Absolutely. 50 to 60 times this would happen.
One of those predictions led the Suns to acquire a little-noticed Miami player named Rex Chapman.
15.9 seconds to go, and we're tied.
A few weeks ago, we were there when, in the last few seconds,
6 seconds. 5.
Chapman made an off-balance fadeaway jump shot to conquer the Sacramento Kings. According to Ainge, giving Chapman the ball that night was a no-brainer because of his brain type.
Typically, it's the best brain type for clutch performances in all athletics. Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, John Stockton.
So when you put Rex Chapman in that position at that point in the game, you had one extra tool to tell you he will probably make this shot work.
Well, you know, last night's game was the 30th time he's made the shot work.
He's not making this up.
No, I don't think he's making it up. I've seen him do this, and it seems to be very predictive.
Dr. James Fallon, a professor of neurobiology at the University of California Irvine's Medical School, studies the brain and finds scientific support for Neidnagel's work.
This is the area that controls the main trunk and legs of the body.
For example, experiments have shown certain parts of the brain do control specific functions.
In fact, some people do use these areas more than others.
Neidnagel's theory links these brain parts to personality traits.
His prediction is that the frontal area is really most active in extroverts. And you know, an interesting thing about this, which I don't know if John considered, But the great motivating neurotransmitter of the brain is dopamine. Well, it turns out that where dopamine is all in this frontal area. And dopamine's saying, just do it. Extroverts can just do it and interact with the outer world. So it really makes sense.
For all of this scientific talk, John Neednagel is the first to point out that he's not a scientist, and he didn't come up with this in any scientific way. But rather, 20 years ago, he stumbled across it while coaching Little League Baseball.
I started seeing so many similarities in certain kids.
What he noticed was that kids who had similar personalities moved in similar ways.
Just like that little boy swing right there. Did you see how he used all of her body? His little lower body didn't do anything.
Well, you're sure seeing shades of movement there that I'm not trained to see yet.
Neednagel says the ability to see and link those kinds of subtle movements to a child's personality changed his life. He became obsessed.
I just couldn't shut my brain off on this.
He quit his job in the commodities business, went to medical libraries and researched full-time, and as his understanding of the brain deepened, the trophies began piling up.
And each year I became more successful because I understood it better.
Neednagel wrote a book, Word Spread. He worked with a championship golfer, a diver who's thought to have Olympic potential, professional baseball, basketball, and football teams.
It is caught up in the 46.
It's like the iceberg. The majority of it is still beneath the water. But just what we know now is enough to blow my mind away. It's enough to give me all that I can handle.
Phoenix selects Garrison Hurst.
Especially over the next few weeks.
The Seattle Seahawks select Rick Meyer.
Neednagel is advising teams for the upcoming NFL draft.
Manning is back.
This year's two top prospects are college quarterbacks Peyton Manning and Ryan Leaf. Both will get multi-million-dollar contracts. But according to Neednagel, only one of them has the right brain type to be a star in the NFL.
So between Leaf and Manning, who's going to be the star?
Well, I'm sworn to secrecy on that one, Nancy, so I have to keep that quiet at this time.
So you know we're going to be watching you.
Yes, unfortunately, I know that.
Well, a couple of days ago, you watched me play tennis. Based on what you saw, what can you tell me about my personality?
Well, I could tell from your motor movements that you were the CEO or presidential type, which is a very energetic person, creative, logical, and structured, and that you like to be in control of your life and surroundings around you.
And you can tell that based on watching me play tennis?
I can. Through the energy you performed, through your technique and more mechanical aspects to the game. And I could also tell through your real fine motor dominance that you didn't have the big muscle control, and those are the types of people that manifest your type.
Now, is that what makes me a good surgeon?
It does. You're much more on the fine motor than gross motor side, and so that would make you very proficient at your work.
Interesting. Who else in the public eye has my kind of brain type?
Well, females have been Margaret Thatcher, Jane Seymour, even Demi Moore. On the male side, Martin Luther King, Ronald Reagan, and a baseball pitcher like Greg Maddux of the Atlanta Braves.
That's pretty good company.
It is.
John, thank you.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
it very much. We'll be back right after this.
We've seen how Jonathan Neednagel's brain typing methods got Sammy Sosa to hit more home runs and help teams like the Orlando Magic draft the right players. But this is something you truly have to see to believe. As our story continues, watch as we sit in on a session Jonathan had with one of the newest members of the San Diego Chargers.
Tell me, okay, where are you from? Wisconsin. Wisconsin.
Going Deep sat in on a brain typing session with San Diego Charger free agent quarterback Jeff Baker. Observing his natural body movements and speech patterns, Jonathan diagnosed Jeff's brain type to be one very compatible for his position, yet too affected by the crowd, prone to rush and be inattentive.
Guys like yourself will tend to jump the gun and force things and just, can you relate to that at all? Because you're a great imaginative person, but you have to get in a little bit more to looking and seeing what isn't. In fact, look up into the stands, pick out a palm tree, pick out a flag, and if you just focus on that, it'll take you out of the la-la land and put you into the here and now.
Hopefully what he says is true, and I can definitely hang around this league for a long time and make some money.
Is there a certain brain type that perhaps makes for a great quarterback?
There's a type called ESTP that's your #1 quarterback in the NFL consistently over time. Montana, Marino, Aikman, Namath, Favre. There's just these top, even back to Johnny Unitas. And so they share a similar design.
ESTP, that stands for extroverted, sensing, thinking, and perceiving, qualities that he says make the best quarterbacks.
How about basketball?
Basketball, ISTP, Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, John Stockton, just so many fantastic players who have that makeup. It's the type that I'm always looking for in basketball.
ISTP. That's just like ESTP, except the best basketball players, he says, are introverted. If you think Jonathan's brain typing is a bit out there, consider this. Neuroscientists like Dr. Charles Reback at the University of California's Irvine campus credit Jonathan's findings with helping them with their studies on epilepsy, as they try to learn which circuits of the brain become miswired during seizures.
He is relating what the brain does, the functions of the brain, with personality types. And he is putting it together as no one else has. And I think we'll learn a lot about the brain through this type of work that John is doing.
The teams he works for affectionately call him the brain doctor, but you wouldn't find Jonathan in a setting like this. You see, he's not really a doctor at all, but a former financial advisor. He says this whole brain typing thing came to him about 20 years ago when he was coaching Little League.
I noticed that some kids, let's say, were more reserved and real warm-feeling kids, and they could be hurt easily, very sensitive, but they were also, there was a flippancy to them. They were kind of go with the flow. They weren't your kids that believed in structure and order and doing things by the book. And I started noticing a number of patterns that repeated themselves with certain kinds of kids, and I knew there was something to it.
Once he honed into the kids' brain types, he knew in what positions they would best excel and how to best coach them. Then, a very funny thing started to happen.
Well, we started winning more than I should have been winning.
He also learned then that just as certain brain types exhibit certain strengths, they also expose weaknesses.
One of the things that I have done in Major League Baseball is to help pitchers understand the types of the batters, because each type is a sucker for a certain kind of a pitch.
Padres pitcher Randy Myers also learned his brain type demanded too much from him on the mound.
For me personally, is being detailed is not to go out and try to fine-tune every pitch. And that's a problem my brain type has, and it's a problem I've had in the past. Now that I know that and I've corrected that, I think it allowed me to have more success.
Neednagel is now writing a follow-up book aimed at using and understanding brain typing to make us better spouses, better parents, better people. Aside from professional sports, brain typing, he says, helps us in our understanding of young athletes too. Former tennis pro turned psychologist Vic Braden.
We've allowed some kids to think that they're total failures in sport, when really the problem is they're just in the wrong sport, and if we knew their brain type, we could direct them to the best sport.
At $500 a pop, I wasn't about to let a complimentary brain typing get by.
I'll do it.
Give it a shot. So I dusted off what was left of my high school glory days. As I huffed and puffed, John watched. My noggin was being typed.
Well, besides being a little gassed and out of shape, you're loose, you're smooth, which is right brain dominant. You shoot a lot with a lot of wrist action, shows your fine motor dominance for being an ENTP. You're a very conceptual and imaginative person. Stay away from being a CPA or an IRS auditor. And don't be on an assembly line either. You'll cut your hand off because you'll daydream and it's gone. I completely believe it's the future in sports because it will permeate not only society but the athletic world in the days ahead, guaranteed.
Joining me now is Going Deep correspondent George Chicharone. George, this guy's been around for 20 years and we've never heard of him. Why not?
Well, it's not the type of thing a lot of teams want to advertise on the side of a bus. A lot of people are still skeptical about this. In the old days, Jonathan would have to come and go through the back door of the general manager's offices. But I think as time goes by, he's getting more and more acceptance, and we'll hear a little bit more about him in the future.
Well, we know what category he put you into. Where do I fit in this whole thing?
You're a very lucky man. We have the same category as well as your dad. We are the ENTP type. And we share our brains, or our brain type, with the likes of Steven Spielberg, Harrison Ford, the whole OJ defense team, as well as, cannot forget, Mr. Ted Kennedy. So.
Okay, well, there you have it. That's the kind of guys we are. Thank you, George.
You got it.
We'll be right back.